We've all got one and we shouldn't be afraid of using them. I'm talking about mobile phone cameras. Well, hello everybody and welcome to another episode. And in this episode, I'm going to be talking about one of the most prolific, one of the most ubiquitous, one of the most successful in many circumstances, and in my opinion, one of the best kinds of camera available today. We've all got one and we shouldn't be afraid of using them. I'm talking about mobile phone cameras. And I reckon if some of the great photographers from the past were around today, they wouldn't be using a big clunky old DSLR. They'd be using one of these, a tiny little camera in a phone. Now, I do love photography using a digital mirrorless camera. I love using the old vintage lenses and I enjoy using the film cameras too. But I also love using these mobile phone cameras. These are the cameras that record our everyday lives in a far greater level of detail than has ever happened before. Yes, they're point and shoot cameras, but so is an Olympus Trip 35, and I don't hear too many complaints about those. So let's not be sniffy about this magnificent technology and embrace it in terms of stills and video too. Now, as well as mobile phone photography, I'm also going to be looking at a wonderful sound solution I've found to help me make these videos. I've had quite a few problems with sound on these videos, especially recording outside. Problems like wind noise, extraneous sounds, getting the levels not quite right, lots and lots of problems. But I think I've found the perfect solution to help me out. It's the Hollyland Lark 150, which is a wonderful little system of radio mics, a transmitter and a receiver, and it's a lovely little kit, and we're going to be looking at that very shortly. Now, up until recently, I was using what is now a fairly old iPhone. It was the first generation iPhone 5 SE, and that has a 12 megapixel camera, which is fairly low res, but it's entirely usable, and I made thousands of images with that camera. I used it for street photography. I made lots of street images with it. I used it for general sort of note taking, just visual records of things, because they're really useful for that. And I made some experimental images with it too. It's fantastic for use on the street because it's so small, it's so discreet, and it's so unobtrusive. It's like you don't have a camera with you at all, because so many people are holding phones on the street. So many people have them in their hands, so many people walk along with them in their hands, and so many people use them for photography as well. So you really don't stand out, you're really not obtrusive, and the camera itself is very tiny and very non-threatening. It doesn't feel threatening to have it pointed at you, taking a picture of somebody. It's just not a threatening machine to use on the street because they're so commonplace on the street, because it's such an everyday occurrence. So I would submit this is an absolutely ideal street camera, as is any mobile phone camera. Sure, there are technical constraints, but they can make you more creative, as we've often said on this show. If the camera doesn't have lots of bells and whistles, as these cameras don't, they're essentially snapshot cameras, that's going to make you think more creatively. It's going to make you work more creatively, and they really do that. They're great for expanding your creative abilities. Also, using some of the many apps that are available for mobile phones, there are lots and lots of apps available. I made some interesting experimental images, and I was able to find a new personal style in digital art. So this little iPhone was a very powerful enabling creative force because it allowed me to develop this entirely new genre of image. Editing your images is really easy with an app like Snapseed, for example, which is free, but there are loads of apps available for these camera phones that permit editing, some better than others. Snapseed's a pretty good one. The main ones I used were Snapseed and Superimpose. I found those the most useful, though there are many others available. I used Hipstamatic a lot as well. I've made thousands of shots with that software. I used to use it before it became inflated and overblown, which I think it kind of has done now. But I had a great time with the little iPhone SE. I used it for years and years and years, and I made what I think are some interesting images with it. I've recently got a more modern phone, and that's this one, the iPhone 12 Pro Max. Now the resolution is unchanged at 12 megapixels, so it's still a fairly lowish res, not massively high, but certainly usable. And I don't really think the images have changed too much in terms of colour and quality of the actual image and so on, but there are some significant improvements, and the first of those is that the 12 Pro Max has, like many modern phones, whoop, I've got it upside down, has 3 lenses, and that makes the phone far more versatile. There's a wide lens which has a 35mm equivalent of 13 millimeters. There's what you might call a standard lens that has an equivalent focal length of 26 millimeters, and the longest lens, which is really quite long, has an equivalent focal length of 65 millimeters. And as you know, I quite like shooting in the longer focal lengths, so I've been using that one quite a bit. So as you can see, the more modern camera phone is very much more versatile than the older phone was, and that gives you quite a wider, well, a much wider range of choices when it comes to making your images. Now, unlike the first generation SE, the 12 Pro Max shoots in RAW, so if you shoot in that mode, you've got lots more possibilities for adjusting your images in post. So you can put them into Photoshop or Lightroom and play around with them and change things like white balance and exposure and so on, because in RAW you record the whole of the information that comes off the sensor without any compression, as JPEGs have. Personally, I find the JPEGs that come out of the camera more than adequate, so I've not used the RAW mode too much, but it's certainly an improvement over the SE to know that it's there. Another major improvement that the 12 Pro Max has over the original SE is that the newer camera has sensor shift image stabilisation, and that is a fantastic piece of tech. A lot of the mirrorless cameras have it, and it virtually eliminates camera shake and gives incredible rock steady video, which we'll look at a little later on. However, the one feature that has astonished me, I think, more than anything else about this camera, and I do find it quite astonishing, is that it has a portrait mode. Now, what that is a provision for taking a portrait, and the camera will generate from the small amount of defocus in the background a vastly increased amount of defocus. And so what we've essentially got is electronically generated shallow depth of field, and it really is astonishing. It's not like previous generations of digital shallow depth of field that didn't really work and didn't understand the depth in the image. This one does. It can tell where the depth is, it can tell where the near parts of the image are, and it can tell where the far parts of the image are, because what I think it's doing is increasing the amount of blur that's already there, which there will be a small amount of blur already there from any sensor, no matter how small, and it's generating this incredible, authentic looking, soft, beautiful blur with specular highlights, you know, little bubbles from point light sources. It really is incredible. And that leads me to a question. I think photography in the future is going to go further and further towards this type of what is essentially computational photography. I can see this technology really progressing in the next 10, 20 years or so, and it really does make me wonder whether there will be any large sensor cameras in general use at that time, because this technology promises to be extremely successful. So I suspect from this that the future of photography is going to be more and more computational. An absolutely fantastic feature. It really works successfully, and I got to admit, it absolutely blows me away. So there's been lots of progress in stills on this camera compared to the older iPhone SE, and massive progress in video, such that this is now a very powerful video camera, and we'll be looking at that next. Before that though, I'd like to share a solution to one problem I've found in making these videos. I've had lots of problems recording sound outdoors, lots of problems with wind noise, extraneous noise, all sorts of difficulties, because I never could quite get the right kit together to make it all work as it should. However, I think I've now solved that problem with a lovely little kit, a lovely little audio kit sent to me by Hollyland. It's the Hollyland Lark 150. So let's go over to our bloke in the studio and see what he makes of it all. The Hollyland Lark 150 is a tiny system of wireless mics and a receiver, and it will work up to 100 meters. That's 100 meters of range that you can have between yourself with the transmitter and the receiver, and you're still going to transmit that sound. And it's all stored in this handy charging case. The system switches on and pairs as soon as you take the mics out of the box. It scans very quickly all the possible frequencies and it selects the best. So it's a very smart system. In the box, what we have is the charging case that houses the two transmitters and the receiver. So all the time those are in the case, those are being charged. You also get a bag with various accessories, and that is two lavalier mics, two lavalier windshields, two transmitter windshields, and various other cables to connect them all together. It's a very nicely packaged and a very neat little kit. Now, although the transmitters themselves have microphones, it's good to see that there are lavalier mics included too, so this really is a complete kit. Connection is really simple. The mics pair to the receiver instantly without any fuss. For run and gun work, you can put the mic on the camera. There's a cold shoe that will slip right onto the camera and mount very nicely there, and you can see your output on the back of the camera as you're shooting. The output of the transmitter is connected to a recorder, for example this Zoom HN1 that I use. You can use the lavalier mic or the transmitter on your lapel for outdoors or location or vlogging work, or put the receiver on the camera with a cold shoe and connect the output to the camera so that there's no syncing of the soundtrack and the recorded soundtrack on the video needed. And I find that really useful. It really is a pain syncing up separately recorded audio. With this system, it's recorded by the camera perfectly in sync from the start. So that's a real bonus and a real helpful feature of this system. The system will record in 3 ways, with one mic that will give a mono track, and that's what I'm using now. 2 mics will give you a stereo track for two-hander scenes or interviews, and it can also record 1 mono track plus the same track at a lower volume, so everything's recoverable. So if any of your levels clip, for example, you go over the top of your recording limit and get distortion, well, you can fill that in from the safety track that's recorded at a lower volume. So that's a really useful feature. It means you don't have to miss any parts of your recording, and if you do go over your level limit, then you can remedy the situation quickly. Levels are controlled on the receiver. It's very easy to adjust either level. Just turn either of these controls here according to which mic you're using. There's a mute button on the receiver for each microphone. Just press the main control knob inwards and that will mute that particular track. And there's also a mute button that you can press on the transmitters to mute the track if you need to do it that way. And the whole kit will run for 4 hours on a single charge, and that is plenty of time for my needs. This really is a great little kit, and it's an ideal solution for recording sound on pretty much any video shoot, I would imagine, but it's certainly a great solution for my needs. It's very small, it's very portable and light. It pairs and connects simply, and everything works smoothly and easily, and I haven't had any problems at all in using it. It really is simple to use and very user-friendly. A really great little piece of kit. So this iPhone 12 now shoots amazing video, and there are 2 reasons for that. The first is the resolution. So this camera will shoot in 1080p at 30 and 60 frames per second, and it will also shoot in 4K at 30, 60 and, importantly, the cinematic 24 frames per second. So this iPhone 12 shoots beautiful video at all of those resolutions. Now, the second reason for the improvement in video quality I think I've already mentioned, and that is the sensor shift stabilisation, which is incredibly effective. It really is astonishing how well this system works. It works fine with the front or the rear cameras. I'm actually shooting this segment of the video on the front-facing camera, the smaller of the 2 cameras, and the stabilisation no doubt is going to be working nicely. It works on the rear camera as well, and on all of the 3 lenses, including the very long lens, the 65mm equivalent. On all of those lenses, it gives absolutely rock steady video, and it really is quite a stunning technical achievement. Absolutely astonishing. I really am astonished at how well the electronic steadying works on the iPhone 12, and it just seems to completely eliminate all shake. You do occasionally, very occasionally, see it adjusting itself. You can just see points where it's accounting for that shake, but you only see that if you're looking for it. By and large, this is a system that totally eliminates all shake for all practical purposes. I reckon it's at least as steady as the little camera that I'm shooting on now, the DJI Osmo Pocket, and it might even be more steady than that. I'm not really sure. There's certainly not much in it. The iPhone 12 is now a very powerful video camera for vlogging, for other video purposes, especially if you pair it with an app like Filmic Pro, for example, which allows very fine control over exposure and focus and so on. But the inbuilt app is fine anyway. It seems to work absolutely fine anyway. But it's so good, I've even heard of people shooting shorts and even the occasional feature on phones like this, because of course it's not just the iPhone 12. Pretty much any modern phone has stabilisation built in. Whether it's as good as this system, I don't know. This system is absolutely wonderful. It seems to eliminate all shake, but of course the iPhone isn't the only one that has it. So as a photographer, and in my own humble way as a filmmaker, I can't ignore these devices. They're just getting too good, and they hint at the future of digital photography, which I think will become more and more computational rather than optical. However, on that question, time will tell. So I guess that's it from me for now. Please don't forget to like, subscribe and hit that bell thing before you go. Let me take this opportunity to thank all the subscribers who've joined us, subscribers old, subscribers new, those who've been with us for a long time and those who've just joined. Many thanks to you all, and please, if you've enjoyed this episode, do hit the sub button. Give us a sub, it would be very much appreciated. Thank you. Many thanks also. A deep heartfelt thanks to all the patrons who've been with us for a long time since the start, and patrons who've just joined. Many thanks to everybody. As I've often said, this channel could not do what it does without the support of patrons. So thank you for your continuing support. So that's it from me, and I will see you next time for some more Zenography.